True, all we need is love, but do we really know what love is? Love is a word that is sung about in songs, written in poems, talked about a lot, and it is something many people long for, one way or the other, mostly in the form of a partner. We hear it a lot these days, be heart-centered, and be love. Love is the answer, because love always wins. Send love and light, and so on. People use it casually in conversations in their everyday lives. It is seen as the solution to all the world problems. All you need is love. If that's so easy, how come nothing has changed fundamentally on planet Earth, despite the obvious technological progress? We still see genocide, oppression, and wars happening. Hundreds of thousands of children and civilians have died in the Middle East and around the world because of the war machine under the control of psychopathic leaders who couldn't care less about anyone who holds up a peace sign with the proclamation of love as the force for change. Looking at it more closely, we can see that love is one of the most abused and misunderstood words. We mistake things like gratification, sentimentality, obligation, duty, passion, desire, and other superficial emotions, ideas, and conditioned concepts as love in order to fill something that is ultimately lacking within us. These distortions are also used, mostly unconsciously, as buffers to avoid facing reality as it is, by looking at the world with rose-colored glasses on, instead of seeing oneself and the world more objectively, beyond appearances. There's personal love between humans, motherly love, love of family and community, love for oneself, love for something greater than the self, love for God, and even love for man-made ideologies and concepts, such as for a nation and country. So what is love? How can we describe or define such a powerful force? Words are very limiting and can only point to it, but are not it. Maybe we can start by examining what love is not. When it comes to interpersonal relationships, we often see control games, jealousy, and envy, which is obviously not love, but expressions and behaviors based on fear and need. Love is related to emotions and feelings, but they can be merely based on chemical reactions in the brain that result in a high, where people feed off each other, which is also the basis for psychic vampirism. Many relationships are based on this feeding mechanism, which has nothing to do with love, but is a parasitic need resulting in codependence. Sexual attraction is also mistaken for love at times. Many people get into relationships for the wrong reasons, be it to escape their loneliness, to fill a hole in their lives, or feed off another person. For the most part, this happens unconsciously, and so people tend to lie to themselves about love and their relationships in many ways, not seeing the other person as he or she is, and not even seeing themselves clearly as they are. To truly love another person, we need to see the other as he or she is, without trying to change that person. That is the basis for unconditional love. But for that to happen, we also need to know ourselves and see us as we truly are, so we don't fall into the trap of illusory projections, which only result in disappointment and hurt once the romantic phase is over. It's about acceptance and consideration, being able to give and receive, to be externally considerate and not expect anything. But beyond personal relationships, the idea of love has also been distorted and used superficially as slogans. It is equated with being positive, open, friendly, not saying or focusing on anything bad or negative, to be always cheerful and have a smile on one's face. Of course, there's nothing wrong with kindness and friendliness, as well as positivity, but it must be based on truth and reality, not lies, self-calming rationalizations or avoidance, including political correctness, which only leads to complacency and ignorance. Some people say we need to be more heart-centered, loving and compassionate. Yes, obviously we all need to connect more to our heart, show empathy and compassion, especially extending it to the whole world, beyond our close friends and family. But what does it really mean? Many people seem to associate love with emotions and feelings or niceness, but is it not more than that, like a higher state of consciousness and being? We seem to mistake many things for love and even judge the intellect as bad, mistaking it for the monkey-predator mind. Hence many suggest that we should think with our heart and do what we feel like doing, which mostly results in mere self-deception and lack of critical thinking. It's about aligning the heart with the intellect, intuition with logic, mysticism with science. Many people seem to force themselves into this artificial and superficial state of love through contrived affirmations and feel-good spirituality, ignoring anything that may be a threat to their positive life view. Ultimately, this results in suppression and armor that is manifested by denying the shadow part of themselves and the world as they ignore objective reality. On the surface, they don't even think that anything is wrong with them. It's very much a blissful ignorant state, trying to stay high on artificial emotional projections, avoiding anything that may give them a downer, and living in a subjective tunnel vision with blinders on. One can see this kind of attitude in many self-proclaimed aware and conscious people, who follow shallow New Age teachings and pop psychology, resulting in self-calming but lacking deeper healing, growth and essentially real love. Love is not merely an emotional state, but a state of consciousness. Just like there are different levels of consciousness, there are also different levels of love one can access on the spectrum of consciousness based on one's level of being and awareness. There is carnal love based on the sexual center and animal part in man, which is the biological drive to procreate, ensuring that organic life on Earth continues. This drive is mechanical, tied to the esoteric meaning of the general law and waking sleep state Homo sapiens is under. Then Then there's courtly love based on the higher centers, which is a higher state of being that can only be accessed through sincere self-work, not giving in to mechanical driven behaviors and choices. Essentially, for true love between two people to manifest, there needs to be a connection and matching on all centers: physical, sexual, emotional, intellectual, and spiritual. We need to continually work on ourselves to bring the centers into balance, so no one feeds off the other, but both complement each other. Love, in its truest sense, means to see the world, oneself, and others more objectively. From an esoteric perspective, it's about evolving towards this objective love. In other words, the more we are objective with ourselves and the world, raising awareness and see things as they are, the higher the degree of love we can access. It is based on knowledge, being, and understanding, not merely emotional states and happy thoughts. Subjective love is attached to one's own idea of the other, or to what can be gained or obtained from the other. People call the most various desires love. These can have to do with social status, addiction to power over or domination of another, sexual interest, and so forth. The emotion fluctuates between satisfaction of getting and fear of losing and is generally centered on the self. Subjective love seeks to somehow forcibly appropriate another into one's extended self. One example of this is showing off what a clever or good-looking partner or child one has in order to somehow increase oneself. Any games of domination or codependence, which often involve the term love, fall in this category. However, by doing the work towards objective love, one shouldn't ignore or suppress anything that doesn't live up to the ideal of higher love beyond the self. Everyone is on a different level of being, with different lessons to learn and integrate. It seems to happen very often in spiritual and esoteric circles that people claim attributes to themselves and inflate their being above the actual state of where they are and what they need to learn and confront in order to grow and evolve. Objective love is not a detached, unemotional state of existence. It simply means to act from one's true self beyond conditioning, programming, and projections, but with a clean emotional center, not one that is shut down. Our emotions are the gateway to love, but they are not love. It's about opening up to vulnerability and not suppressing negative emotions such as anger, sadness, jealousy, grief, but work through them, which leads to compassion and empathy, not only for oneself or close friends and family, but for the world and humanity at large. This also means to experience and feel emotions so we can let them go, without suppressing them or projecting them on someone else. There are many ways to do this: art, music, journaling, as well as breathwork, bodywork, and other healing modalities can help in the process of transmuting the shadow into light through emotional cleansing. It's a delicate and deep process that doesn't happen overnight. In that sense, relationships are also lessons in love and not an end in itself, but can help us to learn more about ourselves. People and friends who are also engaged in sincere self-work can show us valuable lessons as they serve as mirrors and can help to expose parts of ourselves we wouldn't be able to see, since we all have subjective blind spots. A mirror generally is perceived as shocking or socially disagreeable. This comes from the fact that if the mirror is any good, it will conflict with the subjective filters of perception most people maintain concerning themselves. In other words, people's self-image is more or less based on lies to the self, and in the degree the mirror reaches its intended truthfulness, it will challenge these lies. The more lessons are learned, the more knowledge gained, understood, and applied, the more we purify our emotions, the more one's being and awareness raises as the higher centers are activated, and the more we can see the unseen. However, this is a process that is different for each, depending on many factors. Psychopaths, on the other hand, about 6% of humanity, have no capability to experience anything close to love, compassion, and empathy by birth. It's not a psychological disposition, but a genetic one. That is another topic which is very misunderstood and ignored, especially since most psychopaths can appear as normal through their mask of sanity. They are not necessarily criminals in prisons, but can be CEOs, politicians, spiritual leaders, a husband, wife, child, or the neighbor next door. They can tell you exactly what you want to hear, appear compassionate, empathetic, and understanding without meaning or feeling it one bit. To assume that we're all the same and that everyone has access to this higher love, or any form of love, is self-deceiving at best, and we can see those kind of assumptions in the oversimplified idea of we are all one. You cannot be what you are not, nor can you give what you don't have. We are all one, but we are not all the same. There seems to be some major blind spot and oversimplification about the idea of we. This has nothing to do about us versus them, but understanding how complex humanity actually is, what we choose to believe and wish for, and what we avoid to look at and confront within and without. If one looks into the accounts of near-death experiences, NDE, and what some people have seen or realized, there is a common theme: this profound experience of objective love, which is not related to the love as the human personality experiences it. It is, for example, as one person who had a NDE said, not a sentimental get a tear, feel someone's pain feeling, not an emotion. It is beyond sentiment or feeling someone else in this form, but relates more to an all-expansive knowing and understanding. Ultimately, there is no love where there is no truth and knowledge. Love entails seeing the world as it is, not as we like, want it, or assume it to be. Hence, true love is essentially linked to how much one can access objective reality.
You know, the consciousness movement has led us to create a kind of a hybrid spirituality that is mixed with a very toxic degree of narcissism. And we need to look at that. It has made us very hypersensitive and not very strong. I would say to you, what has it made us conscious of? Because if it made us that conscious of the world, we wouldn't be in the state we're in. If it made us that conscious of the world, we wouldn't have dropped the ball on the management of freedom and the Bill of Rights. But we did. We've lost our civil rights. We dropped the ball. We dropped the ball on the management of the Earth's creatures, and we've got 150 chimps left. What have we become conscious of these last 50 years? Where have we been? We've been processing wounds. I know people who say I'm working to become conscious, but I won't look at the TV and I won't read the news. Then what are you becoming conscious of? Myself. Now I have to tell you something. That's exactly the formula through which you cannot heal. You cannot heal. Can you understand that? That kind of narcissism is the classic formula for fueling your own rage. Your own rage. Narcissism, and it's about me, it's about me, it's about my time, my space, my needs, my this, my wounds, my this. I have to tell you that the ungenerous heart and the narcissist go to the hospital and get your meds. Because you cannot, it is not possible to find yourself healing from the serious disorders that require an emergence into a cosmic level of consciousness.
In order for love to be the agent of change towards a better world and to bring about positive change, we also need to acknowledge the darker side of life and the world we live in, the things and issues many people look away from, believing that by simply focusing on the good and positive, there will be a shift in consciousness. This kind of thinking is the blind spot in many New Age teachings these days, which actually results in the opposite of what is intended. For the unacknowledged shadow grows bigger and stronger, manifesting itself unconsciously through our collective. As the saying goes, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. The many ideas of just focusing on love and how people interpret that, or sending love to the world leaders and humanity, or even to the planet, are not acts of real love, but merely emotional projections which are self-deceiving and put man more into sleep, believing he's actually doing something and bringing about positive change. True love respects free will, and one cannot give or send love to someone who didn't ask for it. One has to wonder when people talk about world peace and love, but still vote for Obama and believe the lies we are being told by our governments, be it about 9/11, the war on terror, or anything else that has been clearly used for social control. One can have as many positive, loving, nice thoughts and emotional highs as one like, but if one still believes in lies, follows teachings based on lies, there will be no raise in consciousness nor access to a higher love that can actually be a true agent of healing and awareness. On the contrary, believing in lies feeds entropy, no matter how well-meaning the intent. Love is beyond words, and no change is going to happen if people simply repeat that love is the answer or all you need is love, while still clinging to illusions and not engaging in sincere self-work. Without a deep understanding and knowledge of what love truly is and entails, we just keep going in circles as history is repeating itself. If we really want the shift in consciousness, then we need to take a look into the mirror and also do the work to see the world as it is, without ignoring things that may not look that pretty. There's still much we have to confront before we can enter a new world based on love, peace, and truth. There also seems to be much confusion about what is supposedly positive or negative, subjective or objective. Some people claim that there is nothing like objectivity and all is subjective, Everything depends on how we look at things, and quantum mechanics, so they say, shows us that there is no objective reality or truth, but there is only my or your truth, and we create our own reality by the thoughts we have, what we like to see and what we focus on. But is that really so? It seems that the science of quantum mechanics has been oversimplified into sales bits in the New Age arena and movies like The Secret. This doesn't mean throwing out the baby with the bathwater, as our perception does seem to have an influence on reality. But maybe it's not as simple as we have been made to believe by many best-selling self-help gurus these days. The question about the existence of an objective truth is a tricky one to answer. Philosophical views on truth and criteria for knowing it vary with the old dispute between rationalism and empiricism. However, beyond philosophical or scientific discussion, there usually seems to be one element that is barely questioned in more depth: the state of being and awareness of a person, which relates to how much objective reality he or she can actually access. In our current state of being and existence, we cannot perceive objective reality fully. However, we can work towards objectivity and expand our understanding of reality and ourselves accordingly. A shift in consciousness and awakening implies a higher state of awareness, which means to become more aware of it all, which implies again to see the world and oneself more objectively, without blinders on. This doesn't happen by itself, but requires sincere effort and work to separate truth from lies, within and without. That is the basis of esoteric work, which relates to gaining self-knowledge in order to raise awareness and consciousness to a higher level of being. Subjectivity is the preference to rather consider one's favorite beliefs than the external world. Such a tendency is generally backed by a strong emotional attachment to these beliefs. Wishful thinking, assumptions, and opinions based on reactive behavior directly relate to it. Objectivity is the ability to see things as they are, not as we envision them to be, like them, or want them to be. The ability to perceive objective reality depends upon one's ability to clearly receive. To reach a higher state of objective awareness, one must first see themselves clearly, and that entails to work through one's lies, illusions, buffers, and self-deceptions. It's easy to over-philosophize the idea of objectivity versus subjectivity without considering some very practical applications. For example, regardless of what one believes to be one's truth or what one is thinking about and visualizing, if you walk off a cliff, won't gravity pull you down? Isn't 1 + 1 2 and not 3? Is the world round or flat? And in regards to global issues, is the official 9/11 story true or have we been lied to? Was it a false flag attack? Are we losing our basic rights for our protection from the so-called terrorists, or is there a different reason? Is Obama telling the truth or is he lying? These questions can be answered objectively if proper research is done. However, the truth may not necessarily agree with one's preferred beliefs, opinions, or assumptions. So it is important not to fall into denial or avoidance when some of our core beliefs are being challenged, especially if one is emotionally attached to them and the ego tries to, unconsciously, defend the lies in order to be right, as the truth may open up a can of worms one is not ready to handle. Moreover, no matter how much one tries to close oneself off from the outside world, believing that nothing will affect them as long as one focuses on positive thoughts and what one likes to experience, the bigger issues of the world still have an effect on us all, precisely because we are all one and everything is connected. No man is an island, and no one's reality is isolated from the whole. A fatuous paradigm that is currently running amok through the New Age community for quite a while is better known as "you create your own reality" and is deliberately creating a lot of confusion. "You create your own reality" is a very misleading and tentative paradigm with a certain half-truth in it that is never expressed in this way in the esoteric traditions. Michael Topper brings some common sense to this issue. What makes the "you create your own reality" evangelist fatuous is precisely the fact that all such personal decreeing, positive thinking, and confident imagining takes place in an inevitable context. There are implications, there are repercussions. No one decrees in a personal or private solipsistic vacuum. There is a variegated world of myriad pulls and claims coexisting along with the private desires and designs of the given ego subject. But so what, we hear the die-hard reality creator claim. Don't we remain untouched by those coexistence, as long as we keep secure in the confidence of our own private deservedness, our own authoritative affirmations and specific commissions of positive thought reinforcement? No, man does not live by commission alone. This is why you do not create your own reality, but merely generate reality hypotheses or scenarios which are continuously reflected and tested against the whole. And the whole, being inseparable from the potential of your own innate global being, is constituted by the explicit and implicit alike, by that which is produced through active or positive commission, and that which results from the gaps, blind spots, and vacuums of interpretive omission. All the lines, potential and actual, exist within one's being and are inevitably calculated into the total account. This is what it means when we say there is a context in which all our desire formulation and decreeing takes place. This is a deity-centered reality, not an ego-centered reality. Only the totality of the soul nature is in touch with the totality of spirit being. Anything else necessarily involves a partial perspective, a conceptual self-estimation producing inevitable blind spots. What you have selectively omitted from your reality is manifested as well. We can of course say the victim still deserves his fate or has drawn his fate to himself by a quality of callousness embedded in his characteristic thought formula. And occasionally, this interpretation may touch on some real factor involved in the negative effect. But neither the simple presence of some attitude toward elements of the ultimate negative resultant, nor explanations of residual karma or anything of the kind, may adequately account for all the cases in the same category. It is just simply not true that every rape victim somehow invited the experience as a personal form of commission. The converse implication of this, of course, is that only in alignment and integral consonance with the whole value of being may reality be accurately manifested through the medium of personal expression. For then there is no discrepancy between personal and universal, the perspectival part and the indeterminate whole. It is under this condition that the impossible can be manifested, i.e., that which is self-evidently beyond the power of anyone to personally manipulate or control. For understood in this way, and only in this way, it may be seen that unimaginable effectiveness results when the expression of one's personal will is not different than or removed from the spirit of divine will, i.e., the will to reveal spirit as the truth and authentic character of everyone's illimitable being. This means that in terms of personal will, only the spirit of the teaching function remains. There is no will remaining in the repertoire of personal will except that which expresses perfect alignment, integration, and identity with divine will. Contrary to unwarranted popular opinion, such initiated alignment with the will of Absolute Spirit Being does not result in working one's will unopposed. On the contrary, the very presence of the awakened truth in the form of the spiritual adept has always generated immediate opposition. It has always awakened a corresponding reaction from the collective ego's self-protective slumber. Initiated alignment of will with the creative whole doesn't guarantee smooth personal circumstances. On the contrary, look at the story of every adept, examine the events surrounding the masters known to history. Rather, it ensures that such events will possess the character of an authentic teaching demonstration to all who have the soul to see. It ensures the will of the whole is always done, regardless the partiality and prejudice by which that whole may be perceived in any given case. There is an objective truth outside the context of what our little eye perceives. It seems a tendency in certain conscious movements to overgeneralize and distort spiritual higher truths and quantum physics with an oversimplification of all truth is relative. Hence, some people unconsciously or consciously use this explanation as an excuse and justification for the atrocities in the world, or for whatever one may want to believe in one's own little subjective world, no matter how illusory, false, and based on pure wishful thinking or emotional projections it may be, even to the point of declaring that it is all just about my or your truth, and there is no objective truth. Obviously, we all have our own personal lessons to learn and talents to develop, which could be interpreted as one's personal truth. However, that doesn't exclude oneself from the collective lessons we all need to look at if we want to evolve consciously as one. Simply acknowledging that we are all one, separation is illusion, and seeing everything as light, while focusing on what one believes to be positive and ignoring what one perceives as negative, does not result in change for the better. Conversely, by insisting on what one would like to see as opposed to seeing the world as it is coming into conflict with creation, which then results in entropy and more suffering on a global scale, not less. A deeper insight into this gives the event-enhanced quantum theory developed by physicists Arc Yajic and Philippe Blanchard. Its conclusion in a nutshell: everyone who believes in an attempt to create reality that is different from what is adds to the increase of chaos and entropy. If your beliefs are orthogonal to the truth, no matter how strongly you believe them, you are essentially coming into conflict with how the universe views itself. And I can assure you, you ain't gonna win that contest. You are inviting destruction upon yourself and all who engage in this staring down the universe exercise with you. On the other hand, if you are able to view the universe as it views itself, objectively, without blinking, and with acceptance of the reality and appropriate responses to how things really are, you then become more aligned with the creative energy of the universe, and your very consciousness becomes a transducer of order energy, and your actions are consonant with what is. Your energy of observation, given unconditionally, matched by the appropriate actions, can bring order to chaos, can create out of infinite potential. Some people seem to mistake objectivity for negativity, and wishful thinking for positivity. Most of what people see as negative or positive are their subjective projections and opinions that don't really reflect the world as it is. Without truth and objectivity, there won't be a change for the better, nor a raise in consciousness within and without. In that sense, many well-meaning and good-hearted folks who want a better world actually do more harm than any good by ignoring and denying aspects of our reality that may not fit into their subjective positive worldview, instead believing that by shutting the so-called negative out and just seeing everything as one and light, visualizing, meditating on world peace, and projecting love and light, it will create peace and harmony. Nothing could be further from the truth, and that is actually exactly what certain forces who do not wish humanity to awaken for their own interests want us to do and believe. It ties in with how religious and spiritual values have been corrupted. In other words, the ones exposing the lies and atrocities in the world, the ones looking at the world as it is, with all the different faces of God, including the unpleasant ones which many people perceive as negative and hence like to ignore, are actually doing light work in the true meaning of the word. making the darkness conscious, raising awareness and shining light into it. Light is information and knowledge, not just making things light in the sense of being nice or kind and loving without saying anything bad or heavy. This contrived niceness seems also very common in today's conscious movements, where people don't want to say anything negative, in their subjective understanding of it, of course. In general, some folks hide behind a social etiquette and mask without wanting to say anything bad or touching on any taboo subjects. They speak around issues in order to be spiritually or politically correct, so as to not step on anyone's toes. Of course, that doesn't mean that one should be mean, aggressive and rude or push information on someone who didn't ask for it. It simply means to be sincere and honest with conscience and awareness. There's a time to speak up and a time to be silent. And sometimes you have to be direct, call a spade, and give the lie what it deserves, the truth, regardless of what others may think, even if it doesn't sound nice and it doesn't conform to what someone likes to hear. You can be considerate and still speak the truth, even if others see it as negative from their conditioned point of view. There are many so-called conscious festivals these days, with music, art, workshops and lectures. Lots of pretty people in hip clothes, feathers, furry hats and much eye candy, supposedly representing the counterculture of aware people. There's nothing wrong with dressing up, partying and having a good time. However, when looking at the program of talks and workshops of some of these festivals, something seems to be missing. Mainly the topics we need to become aware of as a species if we want to make the right turn. At any festival that claims to be conscious, spiritual, and supposedly the reflection of the counterculture, one must ask, why are there no workshops or lectures about the genocide in Palestine, the crimes by the US government, aka military-industrial complex, the idea that psychopaths without conscience seem to rule our world and institutions, that 9/11 is a lie that has caused oppression and misery all over the world based on a fake war on terror, that Obama is a corporate puppet just like the old boss, that UFOs may not be signs of our space brothers coming to help us, but that we are actually food in many ways, or that we are not one big human family, but there may be souled and soulless humans, and many other issues. All these topics are part of being aware and conscious, are they not? It seems that conscious festivals like that are becoming more and more a hip thing, rather than using it to truly help people become aware of the shadow that needs to be made conscious of and shine light into. It's not just about doing yoga, eating raw food, and knowing permaculture, nor is it simply about being positive for the sake of being positive, or learning about how to manifest your desired income.
Was very much grounded within the counterculture of the 1960s, of which this festival is indeed a legacy and an extension historically, and talk to you about some of, I don't really want to talk to you about the similarities because you know that the similarities are mainly cosmetic. And there are some other philosophical similarities which I'll discuss, but one of the things I'd like to talk to you about is some of the differences. In the 1960s, the countercultural movement had at its core, we had the music, yes. We had the drugs, which was not in all ways a high side of it. There was the music, There was a definite sense of counterculture. There was a definite repudiation of certain values which people deemed to be obsolete and unsustainable. But it bears noting there was also at its core the repudiation of a war, and ultimately the ending of a war, which means that the counterculture at that time was making a serious stand against something new on the planet, something horrible on the planet, called American military domination of anything it cared to dominate. And that gave a moral authority to the counterculture of the 1960s. And I would hope that a festival like this does not, and the heart that brings us here, the consciousness that brings us here. I'm reminded of a line in A Course in Miracles where it says, you cannot bring the light to the darkness. You must bring the darkness to the light. Dream and I were having an interesting conversation, and she said, when we were talking, I don't know where Dream is, but we were talking about this festival. She says, well, people just want to be in the light for a few days. But I say to you, as your sister, as your spiritual companion, embedded in the principles of A Course in Miracles in my own spiritual search, but I know that there is only one truth spoken in many different ways. There is a difference between transcendence and denial. And it's a consciousness that brings you to a festival like this. Is one in which we feel as Americans, as men, as women, as citizens of the planet, that we can be here, that this can be anything with true gravitas or moral authority, and we are forgetting the fact that our country has turned into a permanent war machine. Then there's something very sad about this festival rather than happy for me. Now, earlier we were talking about the fact that men and about the feminine power and the divine feminine. And there was another, I heard someone say that the men here are holding the space for the feminine, which is very beautiful. It's a very beautiful thing, the mix of, obviously there are men and women here. And both for the women who want to hold the space for the divine feminine as well as for the men who are holding the space for the divine feminine. Thank you so much. I'd like to talk to you for a moment about the divine feminine, because the divine feminine has a fierce aspect. The divine feminine is not just dressing up. The divine feminine is not just getting pretty and whatever pretty of the day is, whether it's big boobs or feathers. It's all cosmetic. Hello. The divine feminine cares about the fact that 17,000 babies die on this planet every day of hunger. The divine feminine cries. The divine feminine shrieks when she has to. There is an interesting anthropological characteristic of every advanced mammalian species that survives and thrives. And that is the fierce behavior of the adult female of that species when she senses that there is a threat to her cubs. That whether it's the mama bear or the tiger or the lion, do you know that even among the hyenas, the adult female hyenas encircle their babies, encircle the cubs while they're feeding, and will not let the adult males of that species anywhere near the food until the cubs have been fed. Surely the women of America could do better than the hyenas. And the fact that collectively, not in terms of our hearts are good. And I know that the heart that draws us to a place like this today is good. But we have to ask ourselves, at what point, whether you're in therapy or you're at a festival like this, at what point do you stand in that place which is not comfortable? Do you stand in that place which is not comfortable and not turn away? Because if a countercultural movement, such as this at least externally represents here today, is one, I asked earlier, I said, is there anything political going on here? And I was told, no, these are just people who are ready to transcend. And let me be very clear once again about that difference between transcendence and denial. Because if the countercultural movement in 2011 is one in which it is deemed for whatever reason acceptable to look away from the fact that tremendous amounts of unnecessary human suffering occur on this planet and in this country for no other reason than that so a relatively few people on this planet and in this country can have all the money they want. That is not service. It is not countercultural. It is the epitome of being co-opted by the very culture that we seek to counter. Now, you might say to me, well, what do you want us to do? I don't know what you're supposed to do. None of my business what you're supposed to do. But I'm asking you, as Jesus said to the disciples the night before the crucifixion in the Garden of Gethsemane, please do not go to sleep. Do not go to sleep in the hour of my agony. Remain awake. That's what they do to you. They put you to sleep. The system would love this festival. The system would love this festival because it's not saying fuck you to anybody. And there's a sense that that is somehow spiritual. There's a sense that that is somehow spiritual. And I believe deeply that as the Course in Miracles says, look at the crucifixion, but do not dwell on it. I'm not saying let's dwell on what's bad, because if you dwell on what's bad, then it's true. That is, you just focus on it and make more of it. But to not look at it at all. To not look at it at all. There's not the divine feminine about that. The divine feminine, if there was a starving child here, somebody tell me, if there was a child here, or if anyone, God forbid, let's just talk about our deep humanity. Let's say right here, right now, God forbid, somebody had a heart attack or something. Well, the fact that I'm speaking up here would be irrelevant. And somebody would yell and say, is there a doctor here? We would all get deeply human very quickly, wouldn't we? Yeah. Are you with me? Now, this is an interesting thing about our country. If you look at I always say that if I'm on an airplane somewhere, anywhere in the world, I love to sit next to an American. Characterologically, we're cool people, and we care. We're not, we're human beings, and there's a spunkiness, and there's a coolness. But our collective capacity for denial and grandiosity is frightening and perilous.
In the end, most people are only afraid of the unknown and what they don't understand. Once we make the effort to deprogram ourselves from our conditioning and gain knowledge and understanding within and without, shining light into darkness, our awareness and consciousness rises, and we start to see in alignment with who we truly are, beyond preference, wishful thinking, or denial, and then can act in alignment with our higher self and the universe. If we truly love life, the world we live in, and want positive change, then this also implies to look at the issues and injustices in the world so many of us like to ignore or deny. This is not being negative, but the work to be done during this time of transition. Seeking truth and making the darkness conscious needs to happen within and without, not just one or the other. Activism and spiritual self-work go hand in hand. It's not separated, but interrelated. The problem that comes with truth seekers and activists who only focus on the outside is that they can easily fall into the trap of disinformation, or they resonate with lies, because their reading instrument, the self, is not tuned correctly through sincere self-work, which would help their critical thinking abilities. It becomes harder to separate truth from lies, and one may even spread disinformation unknowingly, because one is less likely to see the unseen, or the devil in the details, so to speak, resulting in oversimplifications, assumptions, and misconceptions. In other words, I need to understand my machine, my habitual way of thinking, and how my emotional reactions and attachments can distort things, how I take in information, and how my own bias and conditioned beliefs filter information, which can result in cognitive dissonance. According to the mystic and spiritual teacher George Ivanovich Gurdjieff, the human organism is constituted by two fundamental functions, essence and personality. Essence is what we are born with, the raw material of one's being. It includes the physical body, genetic makeup, energy metabolism, the inborn capacity for emotions and sensations. There are also external influences that affect us, such as planetary vibrations, present in the immediate environment at conception, during the fetal stage and at birth. An astrological birth chart can give some insight into that. As we grow, our essence is molded by cultural influences. It can mature along the lines of its inherent nature and potential, or it can become blocked in its maturation and hence form something that works against its inborn potential. Essence would evolve in societies where essential practices and values predominate, such as sincerity, love, truth, compassion, knowledge, and so on. Obviously, we live in a world where such values have become distorted and polarized, meaning that our society at large has taken on pathological values that are seen as normal, and people can no longer make the distinction between healthy and pathological thought process and logic. One is no longer able to draw a line between correct thinking and deviant thinking. The influence of higher density beings and forces may also have an effect on us in that regard, as explored in UFOs, Aliens, and the Question of Contact. Personality is the mask we carry over our essence, the vehicle for essence to work through, so to speak. Our personality is conditioned and programmed through upbringing in a society that is built on lies. And the stronger the programming, the harder it is for essence to come through. Hence, deprogramming and facing the lies of one's personality is key, so it becomes a direct reflection and expression of essence, which ultimately leads to conscious actions based on one's inherent potential. In a mature person, essence and personality form one continuous I, which is to say that the person is unified. On the other hand, many spiritually inclined people only focus on the self, believing that will change the outside eventually, without making the effort to look at the world more objectively and acting upon it. Gandhi's call to be the change you want to see in the world has also been misunderstood that way. First of all, the kind of change people want to see is different for each, based on one's subjective understanding of it, which can be very distorted, especially if one is avoiding seeing the world as it is, believing in lies and just projecting one's desires and hopes that are based on the conditioned personality, resulting in wishful thinking. For example, just being nice because I want to see a nice world does not automatically make the world so, especially since some humans are wired differently. Another issue is that many people try to explain everything through one system or teaching and do not see its limitations or even distort it to mold it into their belief system. For example, not everything negative in the world is a manifestation of our shadow material, nor is everything that happens to us our karma, nor do we attract everything with our thoughts. Sure, there's truth to the idea of karma, but using that explanation to justify all the atrocities in the world is short-sighted and misses the point, as we still have to act and learn our lessons, not just turn the other cheek or stand by and keep silent, saying, "Oh, it's just your, their, or my karma." We are not the peak of God's creation, and so special and holy that nothing other than ourselves would harm, control, or manipulate us. It's actually quite arrogant and anthropocentric to think that way. We don't do everything to ourselves. It's not about blaming, but getting out of our self-centered view of reality and the universe. There are other forces acting on us, just as we influence, consume, and to a certain extent control lower life forms such as plants and animals. As above, so below. The learning never stops, and humanity still has much to confront and learn about that may require a whole new understanding of reality, just like there are different or expanded views now in science compared to what Einstein and Newton had discovered. There's always more to learn and find out that requires an adjustment and new understanding, expanding our view and understanding of reality. It is what raising consciousness implies. People who are stuck in one idea or teaching and try to explain everything through it are building their own limited reality box. This also relates to psychology, astrology, philosophy, the healing arts, spiritual practices, or any religion, East and West, where many experts in any of these systems are looking through one lens, many of them distorted and false to begin with, not realizing that this approach can easily lead to distortion and a tunnel vision. It can also become an egotistical point of pride, preventing that person to admit to him or herself that there's maybe more to the story which one hasn't considered before, especially when they have written books about it, their career depends on it, and they have an image to sell and live up to. One can see these fallacies with many popular spiritual teachers, researchers, visionaries, therapists, and self-help gurus, where career and image seem to take precedence over truth and reality. There are many topics that affect us more than many of them are aware of, be it the idea of hyperdimensional manipulation, genetic psychopathy, or soulless humans. But instead of being more open to such topics and looking into them sincerely and unbiased, these seemingly intelligent and aware individuals ignore or debunk them right offhand, exposing their own lack of critical thinking. Awareness and study of the aforementioned topics, and also looking into the taboo subject of conspiracies, would actually help and expand their knowledge and ability to truly help others and society at large. Many people tend to laugh at the term conspiracy theories, and even use it with a negative, condescending tone. The social reality that they are taboo solidifies this also deeper into people's minds, subconsciously. Nobody wants to be called a conspiracy theorist. It's like calling somebody a wacko, and commonly used as an ad hominem attack that lacks critical thinking. Most people don't have a true understanding of what the word conspiracy actually means. Historian Richard M. Dolan brings some common sense to this issue. From a historical point of view, the only reality is that of conspiracy. Secrecy, wealth, and independence add up to power. Deception is the key element of warfare, the tool of the power elites. And when winning is all that matters, the conventional morality held by ordinary people becomes an impediment. Secrecy stems from a pervasive and fundamental element of life in our world, that those who are at the top of the heap would always take whatever steps are necessary to maintain the status quo. The very label conspiracy serves as an automatic dismissal, as though no one ever acts in secret. Let us bring some perspective and common sense to this issue. The United States comprises large organizations, corporations, bureaucracies, interest groups, and the like, which are conspiratorial by nature. That is, they are hierarchical. Their important decisions are made in secret by a few key decision makers, and they are not above lying about their activities. Such is the nature of organizational behavior. Conspiracy, in this key sense, is a way of life around the globe.
I think the system contracts and expands as it wants to. It accommodates these changes. I think the civil rights movement was an accommodation on the part of those who own the country. I think they see where their self-interest lies. They see a certain amount of freedom seems good, an illusion of liberty. Give these people a voting day every year so that they'll have the illusion of meaningless choice. Meaningless choice, that we go like slaves and say, "Joe, I voted." The limits of debate in this country are established before the debate even begins, and everyone else is marginalized. They're made to seem either to be communists or some sort of disloyal person, a kook, there's a word, and now it's conspiracy. See, they've made that something that should not be even entertained for a minute, that powerful people might get together and have a plan. Doesn't happen. You're a kook. You're a conspiracy buff.
Our views on life and existence, science and religion, spirituality and evolution, consciousness and psychology, as well as reality as we know it, would take on a whole new understanding when looking deeper into the topics we dismiss so easily, simply because we don't believe them to be true. Let's not forget, not too long ago we believed that the earth is flat. We're being lied to in virtually all areas of our lives, and our attention is being vectored away from the truth. The corruption of science plays a big part in it as well. As a matter of fact, those who get too close to the truth are often attacked and ridiculed. Truth is now good for business in a polarized society with psychopaths in power, steering the ship where pathological traits have become the accepted norm in our official culture. The work to seek truth within and without is not for everyone, nor can everyone engage in it, since people are different inside, some lacking the seed, so to speak. Not everyone is a warrior, as coined by Carlos Castaneda, and everyone has different lessons to learn and talents to develop with a different inner wiring. Nobody is better or worse, it's just what it is in this evolutionary cycle we're in. For that reason, there also won't be a collective awakening where everyone is all of a sudden enlightened or aware. Many folks who are waiting for 2012 for that to happen will be greatly disappointed. Awakening implies evolving consciously. Now is an opportunity, not a guarantee, a window to move up to a level, so to speak. But it doesn't happen by itself. Conscious effort and work are needed to counter the forces of entropy, for there is a way up and down, as the Hopi Indians said about this time of transition. Many are called, few are chosen. Now is the time for the ones who feel called to ask themselves, what am I doing with my life? Where's my attention and focus? Am I doing the best I can to help in this time of transition, in terms on working on myself and seeking truth? Conscious reality creation happens when we are connected with our true self, the higher self, and we become a vessel for higher energies to work through us, which are in alignment with the universe and one's soul's purpose, not the desires, wants, and needs of the conditioned personality. If our actions and beliefs are in alignment with what is, we become transducers of energies that not only benefit us individually, but the world at large, bringing order out of chaos. It is important that the ones who are sincerely engaged in seeking truth connect with others who are like-minded, so we become collinear and act as alarm clocks for each other, keeping each other awake and help in the process of separating truth from lies. A nucleus of truly conscious people acting as conscious transducers of higher energies and seeing the universe as it sees itself, working towards objectivity, can provide the qualitative frequency resonance vibration that will create the template for the new world. The more people do this work consciously, the better. But it is about quality over quantity. There are countless distractions, temptations, and deceptions that keep the seeker away from truth and awakening in this matrix control system, with various forces acting on humanity to keep us asleep. It comes down to discernment, and without inner work in order to see the unseen, we cannot raise our being to truly be the change we want to see, according to our higher nature and not our conditioned personality. At the same time, being the change entails facing reality and see things as they are, not as we hope, wish, or want them to be. It's a holistic approach. Just as we need to cleanse and detoxify our body and give it the proper nutrition, we also need to detoxify the world out there by separating truth, nutrition, from lies, toxins. This has also nothing to do with trying to save the world, but simply engaging in the process of conscious evolution. Nor is it about controlling external reality, but acting in alignment with the universe. And we only become truly aligned if we engage in the work to see the universe as it sees itself. Being entails seeing the world as it is. That is the path towards healing, wholeness, conscious reality creation, and essentially true love. It's a process that is different for each, as we all have our own lessons to learn, karma to work out, and talents to develop in this time of transition. In that sense, everyone also has unique skills which he or she can contribute to the whole, so we can support each other, moving from service to self and competition towards service to others and sharing. It's about working together, creating synergy, but also respecting each other's individuality and process at the same time. What may work for one may not work for another. But to know this, we need to know our true self and also make the effort to see the world as it is, so our actions have real impact and power beyond self-gratification or senseless rioting. The more we are collinear and see the world as it is and act as one, the easier the transition to a better world for all of us. We do create our reality, and our consciousness has an effect on the outside world. But we need to be in alignment with the universe. Otherwise, we will increase entropy and chaos, which also manifests in earth and climate changes, as we can see already happening. Increased awareness combined with action based on truth could mitigate any upcoming cataclysms that seem to be right over the horizon. It's up to each one of us and all of us together.